welcome to another episode of the Point of No Return podcast. On this week's show, I had the pleasure of speaking with Ashley Werhun, CEO and co-founder at Mentorly. A little bit about Ashley and her background. She started Mentorly 7 years ago with her co-founder, and she leads all things growth, B2B sales, marketing, positioning, fundraising, and the long-term vision. She likes to put culture first, as you'll learn on today's show. She spent 10 plus years touring the world performing as a ballerina, basically elite level performance artist, and basically retired at the end of that and started this really cool company called Mentorly, which is a cloud-based mentorship solution for businesses and organizations looking to invest in their people. And obviously very apropos in terms of vision right now and focusing on people. We spoke about her path going from an elite level ballerina to startup entrepreneur, lessons from that world she now uses as CEO, what it takes to have a successful mentor-mentee relationship, and a lot about her long-term vision, which was super inspiring. That's it. I really hope you enjoy today's conversation. Ashley, such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time. Obviously, I want to talk a lot about Mentorly and what you're building. It's such a cool startup. And like I said, I'm personally interested in the world of mentorship. And especially in the world, the kind of intersection of mentorship and technology. But I want to talk a little bit about your background. And maybe to start is the role of the arts, right? You're a professional performer in the past. So maybe, give us a little bit of background about your world, your life in that world.
It's a very straight and narrow path. You have to choose it from when I started training professionally at 11. And then your first professional job is 18. So it's a really high discipline environment. The chances of becoming of that level are kind of like lower than the NBA and NFL. So I sort of frame it for people in the tech world because they often don't know a lot about it. In that life, I was on tour 8 to 9 months of the year. So I've been to most countries and most cities in those countries. And then really early on, I also sort of got taken under the wing of the executive director because I started asking too many questions about where the money came from. I was really interested in how much is, our salaries and how much of that is the operating budget and how much do donors give? And so they really early were like, well, you should come to the board meeting. And so I started to get really curious early on about business development and where do budgets come from and why people give. So I always had those kind of two minds of like a highly athletic professional ballerina and also interested in how the world operated beyond my singular role.
Yeah, so it's like one of those Taylor Swift artists, right? So it's like you're the artist, but you're also the business person running the show.
Yeah, luckily they let us, the talent, be quite catered to. We were just supposed to show up and do what we were great at, and everything else was taken care of. But I was interested in like what those other things were.
Yeah, it's a fascinating world. Obviously, I know nothing about that world. So how big is the industry, if you may? Like you said, you were touring the world. Like how many people would show up at one of your performances?
Yeah, so we performed at, some famous theaters like Carnegie Hall or Hollywood Bowl. So it can range from a small theater in Europe, 500 to 1,000 people, to the Hollywood Bowl was 15,000. I don't know an industry cap size, but for a Canadian perspective, there are 4 major companies in Canada. In those companies, there can be from 10 to 30 artists in them. And so those are all the jobs available at any given time. People say it's hard to start a startup. Well, it's quite hard to be in that world because you don't get a job until someone retires, really. So it takes a lot of persistence to first enter that world and then to thrive in it.
Yeah, it sounds like you were grinding and hustling for a long time in that space.
Yeah.
What led you to leave? Like, why not pursue the dream?
Yeah, so I had a full, 12-year career. That's in your early 30s. That's the average year of retirement. And that's when I retired. So I did reach the kind of like highest level of an artist in that world. And I started Mentorly when I was still actually working as a ballerina to solve my own problem, because I would get hundreds of inbound messages of these like deep and meaningful questions. Should I go to Juilliard? Should I go straight to company life? And these would change like the course of someone's life. And so I felt like there needed to be a deeper way than just messaging them while I was on tour in China and then the next week in Italy. It was really hard to maintain those relationships. And that became kind of a driving factor of interest in my life to understand, could this scale beyond my experience? What could we build to make this experience better? And then naturally, I was just really fulfilled and done. And my body also hurt quite a bit after, 200 shows a year. So it was time to move on, but I felt really fulfilled in doing it.
Yeah, I didn't realize I was speaking to a retiree.
Oh, yes, completely.
That's so fascinating, and I really like how you said you started mentally because you're scratching your own itch, right? You saw like an actual problem in the world, and you're like, hey, I want to go out and solve it. What were the types of connections that you created, right? Like in the sense of like this mentor-mentee relationship, right? A lot of people were just like, I imagine, needed guidance, feedback from someone they looked up to. Like, what were the shape of those interactions?
Yeah, so the thing that stood out in those interactions that it was somebody that wasn't in your unique and close-knit network. It wasn't your teacher or friends or, folks in university because you were trying to pursue something highly specific, whatever kind of industry you were in. And so there was this gap in terms of, in tech, it's so nice. We're naturally saying, hey, here's an intro, please meet so-and-so. But in other areas in the world, that actually doesn't naturally happen. So we're these like far-fetched kind of cold email type of introductions. And I was really happy to take them. And then as I took more of those calls to dive into these people about what they were looking to get, I started myself feeling like I was equally as driven by the relationship as the mentee. And now obviously, understanding the science of giving back and how that produces meaning and dopamine for all of us in our brains. It's natural now, but at the time it was actually surprising that I was probably getting more out of those relationships than them. I was self-reflecting. I was recognizing some of the things I had learned. And so I was really excited about making that kind of scaled for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you said, it's like sometimes in those kinds of conversations, it's not just the person that's receiving the feedback and counsel. You also feel great because you help someone. You feel like you're making a difference in their lives. You mentioned, long hours, time on the road and discipline. I imagine those are similarities today to being a technology startup founder and CEO. Do you see any other similarities now? Maybe with a little bit of perspective of your past career. What have you drawn in terms of lessons for your job today?
Yeah, a lot of the things that come out at our founder dinners or panels are all the same subjects. It's like managing your psychology. How do you have a daily flow that supports your physical health? And a lot of founders are just understanding what that is to have a high level of performance in their lives, like optimizing for high brain function or rest. And that was kind of in my life from the get-go, right? Like I declined all social invites. I never went to weddings, and like I was always focused on my career. And we worked with some of the top sports psychologists in the world to optimize that for myself. So some of those things like, recognizing when you're in performance mode or survival mode or recovery mode. And if your brain's in that mode, how that's affecting your day-to-day work. And it's okay if you're in survival mode, you'll just have a little more empathy for yourself because perhaps you don't have a lot of mental capacity left and you're just trying to get that last task across the line. You can't be creative right now because you're exhausted. So I think having that self-awareness has really helped me. And then also, I think just the awareness that like great things really take a lot of time. And I think in tech news and TechCrunch and everything, the journeys of startups are really kind of like bite-sized and they seem overnight and they seem even like sub 5 years, but that's not the average case for any company. And so I think starting something at age 11 and finishing it at age 30 with one focus, with a lot of ups and downs and a lot of ways that could have turned out, but having that driving force behind you. I feel the same thing in startups is that I recognize that it might just not be a 2-year journey, though like a lot of people are fed that story right today.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I find it's like growing up, it was cool to be in a rock band. So it's like everyone wanted to be in a rock band, and today it's like well, it's cool to be in a startup, but you don't realize the pain that you went through. And I think you had that benefit of like having worked and basically busted your butt for a long time to get to the elite level, ballerina level. And after a few hundred podcasts, I find it's pretty much the founder's journey that you're living is, hey, there's no overnight trick, there's no growth hack. It's like it just takes time, right? I'm going to come back to maybe life lessons. We're going pretty deep and it's all good, but I want to obviously talk about mentorly a bit. So maybe walk us back just to the genesis story of you had that insight of, hey, people need help. There's this new thing called the internet that helps enable connections, put people together. How did you kind of like start working at it? What was the kind of the founding moment of the company?
Yeah, we started to talk to people to see if they had the similar problems and understood what they're looking for in that relationship. And one of the things came back was a lot of people were looking for people in other cities, not their own, and not in their immediate circles. And that's why we led with video call mentorship sessions before the pandemic, before everyone was kind of Zoom friendly. And that customer insight led us to build kind of our MVP platform. And then soon after, at that point in the company, when you're building a B2C marketplace and you're onboarding folks and you're listening to them, you're also sort of just brainstorming of what other motion this could take. Like, how can we get large amounts of both sides of the equation? And I was talking to, actually, I cold called the head of MIT, the dean. At that point, I had nothing to lose. I just cold called him. But he said that there was an existing program of entrepreneurship, of creative entrepreneurship. It sounds like there's a crossover. And I was talking to Sam, who's now a customer of ours at Harvard. And he just said, I love what you've built, but we just need the technology. We don't need the people that you've recruited. We have a program. Largely, when we're talking about mentorship, it's delivered by a program. And we just said, like, how much would you pay for that, right? Because you're just kind of throwing things at the wall to see what would stick. And he said, well, this amount. And so he said, well, can you support that? And we said, sure, right? And so we just created like a unique login for him, maybe an MIT landing page. And we said, let's try this out. And then the next year, the contracting increased by 11 times, and then so on and so forth. And so we started de-risking the pivot to be an enterprise solution through maybe our first 4 or 5 customers when we were kind of shipping this version of our MVP that was private to them to see if this was solving a problem. And what we found was those program managers had a really deep need. Like, they were running all of these mentorship experiences at scale on spreadsheets, through email intros, through video calls. They had no tracking system. It was very ad hoc. And then when we were talking to the folks that were experiencing it, sometimes they had like a 10 out of 10 experience, and then other people's had a 0 out of 10. And they wouldn't know till 12 months later when they sent a survey. So obviously that experience for everyone, if you lift up the program manager and how they build it and how they manage it, it's going to also improve the experience of the mentor mentee. So we started to dig in, and those program managers were very open of what would an ideal product look like. And we started to build it, and then we pivoted to what we now call Mentorly Enterprise, and we released that in the summer of 2020.
Yeah, good timing too, I imagine, also with the pandemic. And I think the other great part of that, the startup story is starting small, right? You get one customer, make them pay, and then eventually you see, hey, this is where the opportunity lies, and have a like you said, a pivot to that. Maybe walk us through kind of like how it works, and maybe I'll take a first shot at it and you can correct it. But imagine you go see a big enterprise company, they have 5,000 people, they've identified, let's say, 100 to 500 senior leaders, and then other more junior employees can then have a mentee-mentor relationship with these folks, and you guys offer the technology, the onboarding, the customer success. Is that a rough approximation, or?
Yeah, do you want to start with us tomorrow as our marketing director? That was a pretty good description. It's a little more nuanced than that. So our technology is very horizontal, meaning it can support any kind of program that either is already existing or is going to come into existence. So some of these companies have really complex programs where they're matching, only engineers, or they're matching tier 3 with tier 1s, whatever internal technology or terminology they use. Some companies have huge playbooks on how they think about mentorship, and then others have never thought about it, and they said, we need to start this because people are asking for it. Can we build it on Mentorly? So on our software, you can kind of turn on and off a lot of the features depending on what you're trying to build. There's pretty nuanced rules that companies have for how they want to supply it. Are there limits for the mentors? Is there a game plan? Things like that. And then another large customer base that is like rapidly growing using Mentorly is what we call a network client. And that is an organization where all of the mentors or mentees don't come from one company. So let's call it Startup Canada runs all their mentorship with us, or we work with South by Southwest and run all their mentorship, or professional organizations. And we're finding that these types of communities, which we see a lot in tech as well, is this interpart in people's lives. They have their work life, but they also have this community that they interact with. And the number one reason they go to that community is for obviously peer connection and mentorship. And when those customers are providing mentorship, it's their number one priority. And so a lot of stake is at the table into what kind of experience they can deliver for their members. So we're seeing those customers come really quickly inbound, refer each other. So that's a really exciting segment that we also support.
Yeah, fascinating. And yeah, there's a few ways to unpack this. Maybe at the simplest level, like how do you then measure value in those interactions, right? So it's like imagine you have data on like number of minutes, messages exchanged, and then imagine surveys, etc. But then ultimately, what's the benchmark for hey, this specific interaction or mentor-mentee relationship was a success? People got on both sides out of it. How do you measure? How do you crack the code there?
Yeah, there's a lot of levels of success. So the first level of success is what is the organization trying to accomplish? So you have to kind of dig deep with them and say, what does success look like to you? Is it that you want to shave off 5 hours of work for your program managers every week? Is it you want to increase your retention numbers? Is it you just want to increase peer connection? So you actually have to dive deeper than the output. You have to work with the customer and understand why are they building this in the first place, and then what do we want to accomplish together. So our success team starts there to understand what they want to go after in their organization, and then we use a variety of tools. So we have matching algorithms to understand on which hard skills, soft skills, different parameters are they lining up. How easy was that interaction to have? So talking to mentors or mentees, understanding was that more or less work than it would be to find on their own. And then we take a lot of user data, so them rating and talking about that experience. But we do it after every single session because I think what people miss in programming is they wait way too long to get feedback. And just with like a product, you want to get feedback every single week, for the new variety of users. In a program, you have to be in touch with your user base, but they don't want to get surveys, right? Survey responses are really low generally in any type of survey. They want to have a way to give feedback right in the experience. So we take a lot of that as well to measure.
Yeah, I noticed on your website you have a few different case studies and obviously sector success stories. Like, and you mentioned some of them, right? You can have like a community, like a South by Southwest that's more, let's say, loosely affiliated. Same thing with maybe Startup Canada, and then enterprise, right? Like MIT or like big evil corporation X. Which do you see having the most traction today, and like maybe why not focus on one more than the other, right? And as you grow and you scale, it seems like very different use cases to start. And obviously, feel free to shoot me down, but it feels like I would maybe start more, let's say, enterprise, big companies, nail that segment, and then move in concentric circles. How do you think about your growth today?
Yeah, that's a good point. We really have two main customer profiles that we look for. And so we're really focused on those two. I think it's natural that you have to also listen to what is going really well. And large networks, we have really high referral rates. So in a network, a lot of the mentors that are on the platform come from large companies. And you see those refer out to large companies. You also receive referrals from those mentors to other networks. So when your go-to-market is sort of leading you, you also have to listen to that. The one area that we don't focus on at all is universities for a variety of reasons. They're more challenging to work with budget-wise. They generally buy technology not school-wide, more niche, and that can be a hard process. So if they come to us and they get referred to us, we're really happy to support. And then you have to be honest about the competitive outlook, right? There's a lot of mentorship technology companies that just dedicate themselves to universities, and they have a little bit more alumni feature set. And for some of our enterprise customers at the university level, they want to choose that, and others they really want to choose Mentorly. So yeah, we're really focused on these two markets, and we're listening to our users to see which one has like the least time in the sales cycle, the least expensive to acquire, things like that.
The business side, like you said, from your past, is like digging into the operation side. What does the sales pitch look like in the sense of like ROI when you're pitching a customer? I know it's like very soft kind of metrics, I imagine, but then when it comes down to brass tacks, how do you then pitch, hey, return on investment numbers, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to build a business use case in the sales cycle. It's something that all of our sales team members do. We never have let's just optimize your workflows and buy this, because we know that when different markets come through and they're looking at their budgets, they're going to keep technology that is either making them money by saving them money or making them money by expanding some of their revenue drivers. So at an enterprise, you really want to talk about their retention rates, their employee satisfaction rates. How much does it cost to replace someone? We know that it's, at least a salary level. When you go to an executive, it's 2 times their salary level. And so then it really becomes, well, how important is retention and employee happiness to you? How important is learning? And then if we're saving you, if one person will stay because of this mentorship program and that's saving you $100,000 and the technology is 20, what does that look like? What is the ultimate goal? Maybe we'll save 50 people from leaving in over 4 years. What does that return? And then for a profile like a network client, you're asking, do they charge people to be part of their community? Are they attracting nonprofits? Are they attracting fiscal partners, right? We have a tool in our system to display fiscal partners in the program. And so although we're selling mentorship technology, oftentimes our sales conversation opens up with like, tell me more about your business model and what is at an executive level, what are you focused on for the next year or quarter? How might that change? Because once you become ingrained into that and you're moving their core initiatives forward, you also have to be, mindful that you're making that person look good at their job. And that's what I like about sales. It's so psychological. You want to make that person look really good to their superior. You want to improve their quality of life by making their work easier and then reaching their mission and numbers and through using our technology to help others. And so unless you get to know those like internal personal drivers of revenue and then also some of their pain points in their workflow, you won't have a successful sale. But when we do, that's when it becomes a partner relationship and we're helping them achieve their goals.
Yeah. Like I imagine like the overall pitch is like just happy and engaged people, right? At the simplest level, right? It's like, we're going to help you have happy people that work for you and that stay motivated. When you think of the kind of data that you're collecting, right, into post interaction, let's say, the mentor fills it, the post interaction feedback. Hey, I would help coach this person on, like trying to get a raise or performance issues, etc. Have you guys thought about internally, like, hey, what else can we do beyond just like creating this mentorship platform? Is there other parts of our software that we enable other parts of the workforce? Again, this is the part of the podcast where I'm just throwing shit on the wall, but curious if you guys have like started thinking about other products that you can start offering over and above, just considering that you're embedded in such an important conversation, right? Like the mentor mentee kind of like interaction.
Yeah, I think we have a long way to go in the mentorship and learning space already. I think if we would start thinking about other products, we'd become a little bit unfocused. I loved Brian Chesky recently came on a podcast and they said, well, why aren't you expanding? Why are you rolling back experiences? And he just said, we haven't earned that yet, right? Like we haven't earned that of our customer base yet. And I feel the same way. I think we have a vision where any mentorship experience you have, whether that's at work or through a network, will be on Mentorly, right? So unless you have your Startup Canada and your Startup Montreal and your own workplace, all of your experiences on Mentorly, we haven't really achieved that yet. And so that is a big market to take into. What we are really dreaming about is what we can do with that data to make that experience even better. Obviously, the evolution and the ease of AI right now, what you can have a lot of learning data with people's feedback, with trends in people networks. A lot of HR leaders right now just get they request a map basically of saying, tell me who's connecting in the company, what is actually happening. I know we have these sectors and org charts and things like that, but I want to know what are people doing and who are they interacting with at the company. And they're doing that pretty manually. So in talking to some of our investors who were like, ex-head of people at Shopify, we can really go deeper into that function and imagine how we can get smarter in the people science function, because we have a lot of the activity data, what they're looking for, what skills they're lacking, and then how we can make these companies and organizations more successful. So that's where we're geeking out more, is around like, how good can this experience be? How intuitive can it be? And how much change can that make in someone's life?
Yeah, that's a great answer. That's a great answer. I love it. You mentioned focus, right? So being focusing on one thing, keeping the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
like, so yeah, before I ask about the size of the opportunity, maybe to like unpack a little bit the timing of the macro trend. Everyone talks about, the buzzword, great resignation. How have you seen the metrics on your side, right? Have you seen a lot more inbound, a lot more people asking, hey, like, you know what, we have to start taking care of our people. It's the most precious resource. And even the word resource, I find a little icky personally, but bref. Yeah, like what are you seeing in terms of just like macro tailwind, like either positive or negative?
Yeah, well, I think we've already been through a macro cycle we're evolving into a new one, launching in the summer of 2020, and then feeling this new kind of economic tightening. I think there's some large trends that you have to consider, right? Like how the generation before us viewed work and their role in a company over time. And that was committing to a company for a variety of years. And then you have to look at how millennials are looking at work and now Gen Z. So with that opportunity, it's quite interesting how millennials tend to go to a company every 2 years. Even the top tech companies, Facebook, Twitter. Well, Twitter might be unique at this moment in time. Snapchat, Instagram, these places that have high salaries, high opportunities for these folks, their average retention is just 2 years. And so when you are going through talent that fast, it's no doubt that you're not making the progress you want because a lot of your time is replacing and vamping up. So one of the opportunities is to just increase that time at the role so that people can have more knowledge in the company. And then also it enables them to promote from within, right? Someone's in the organization, they're fully ramped up. They'd rather have them be in a leadership position than bring people from the outside. I think the other trend that's important, obviously, is remote work and work from home. A lot of these connections and sort of these instrumental relationships that people refer to when you ask someone at the end of their career who helped you, they won't really talk about like the deal they worked on. They will talk about the people that they met and who like took them along and make that intro that changed their lives. And with remote work, it's quite hard to do to create connection outside of your core team. And what we're seeing and hearing from companies is that, teams are quite close. So the engineering team or this part of the sales team, but they might not know anyone at the company. They might not have a friend outside their core team. When we ask them questions on the Gallup study, like who cares about your job other than your manager, the answer is like resoundingly nobody. And so we have to look at company culture, how it's built, and then what steps they're taking to enforce it. And when you said, the overall pitch is happier, engaged people, yes, part of that pitch is let's help you do what you say you do. And a lot of companies and a lot of organizations, especially entrepreneurship mentor organizations, say that they offer learning, development, and mentorship. And then we talk to them and you're like, tell me more about those mentorship opportunities. And they're like, well, we hope you meet at this cocktail or this event, or we did an offsite. And so when we're diving into it, it sort of unveils this pain of like, we should actually do something about it and do it in a measured way. And that's a pretty powerful thing is they've already said it publicly. And so now they really want to follow through on it. So those are a few trends that are sort of like more people trends, not necessarily tech trends. I think the other trend that we're in right now is obviously the market is condensing. We've always been a really narrow and lean team, and we've only raised one round of pre-seed funding, and we're just thriving. We feel like every team member is driving towards that core thing. We haven't had to, enormously change the size of the team. We've always been lean. So I feel really good about the future.
Yeah. It's very cool to see what you guys have built so far. And you mentioned this notion of like, it's not a tech trend, but it is to a certain extent. Like everyone talks about, the current innovations in AI. And of course, they're really exciting, but people still crave people, right? In terms of attention, in terms of like just learning. So I think that's something that it's a good thing to bet on, right? So being able to learn from other people, and despite, let's say, the current market turndowns, well, companies still going to want to make sure that their top people are sticking around. So it feels like an evergreen type of product that should exist in the world. And then maybe beyond, let's say, the current downturn, like how big do you see mentorly going? Like obviously maybe give us a sense of scale too, like right now, like how many be it countries, users, etc., anything that you publicly can share, and then also like just maybe the broader ambition.
Yeah, I think obviously the big vision is to capture some of this future of work and HR market because HR technology is going through a pretty interesting evolution. It took the market quite a a long time to adopt. So like right now, do only companies have an HRIS? They finally said that they need an HRIS system. Then they went to analytics or surveying data, right? Understanding the sentiment. They call it sentiment analysis technology. It's essentially a survey system. And now they're looking, okay, now we know how our people are feeling, what they're feeling. Now let's improve that. And so we're only there right now in 2023, which is late if you think about other areas of the business that is innovating. But if you think about like 20 years ago, people didn't care how people felt at their job, right? It was just like, what are they outputting? So I think what's unique is like the timing right now for the market is to understand performance and then how to improve that in companies. And now it's ready. So I'm glad we are live and launched and in the market now. We're not just seeing that trend and building, because like you said, it takes a long time to even get a functioning working product out there. I think every company right now, most companies have a mentorship program. 70% do, but only 37% of people say they have a mentor. So the gap is not necessarily that they're building mentorship programs, is that the quality is better and they're actually working. That's kind of the gap in the market that we've been able to kind of address. We have tens of thousands of mentorship sessions, customers at different scales. Some customers run 3 programs at once. Some are starting their first pilot with us. But I would say that we're like driving to market. We've proven the concept. People are loving it. They're returning. I think at a startup, you can't really get drunk on that first 12 months of sales and say, look at the logos we're having. Because like what really teaches you is 12 months later and then 24 months later. How good are your renewals? How good is their experience? Are they upselling? And now we're at the stage of the company that we can kind of learn from those trends and see, okay, how can we upsell more? How can we get deeper into the organization? But the trend into HR tech is a big one. And you're seeing different exciting things come out of the woodwork in all different areas. I think the thing that we have to be wary of more of like the trends, there's a lot of companies that were spun up mid-pandemic for specific pandemic reasons. And those spendings have recently been cut from just talking to other founders in the world, right? If you spun something up for, let's say, a virtual cocktail hour that was really peaking in the time of the pandemic and you couldn't prove the ROI and it was sort of this fun social thing, companies are starting to subtract those from their buying budgets, which they're going to rely on things that are meaningful and that their organization really needs. So that's one thing that I think is suffering right now.
Yeah, it's a cool vision. It's a cool vision. Like you said, I think there's just so much opportunity ahead. Just considering just the trends and what you guys are building. Maybe to bring it back to the future. Do you now get reached out, even though like it feels like early in your journey, as you said, but obviously you've like close to almost 7 years now under your belt of building Mentorly. Do you get reached out to give advice to other startup entrepreneurs that are just beginning their own journey?
Yeah, so this Mentorly Enterprise has been in market for 2.5 years, but we've gone through a major pivot and I've been building. The most exciting thing I've done recently is I started to get a little bit detached from the numbers. So I would look at our dashboard and be like, oh, X 10,000 sessions, that's good. It's good in relation. But I started to get detached from that user experience. And so 2 of our customers asked me if I would join their mentorship programs on Mentorly, which was very meta. And I joined them and I've been loving my experience so much. I mean, I report bugs back and I'm like, guys, this needs to improve. But it has really helped me just have like way more empathy for that end user, understand not just the UX, UI, hey, this would be easier if it was 1 click, not 2, but it also helps me kind of understand their soul, right? Like coming to this video call, having a list of questions, helping them walk through them, walking away at the end of the day and really feeling like, oh, my day was better because I ended it with that. Or the opposite, that match was not as great. Maybe I'll meet with someone else next week. It's really helped me do that. So I want to continue being in programs on Mentorly, to help give back to those entrepreneurs, right? Because someone going from very zero idea stage till now is not the same as a funded in-market entrepreneur. I can't give advice to a lot of stages of entrepreneurs, but people that maybe are new to tech, right? Like I have a unique perspective on that, are looking for a technical co-founder, right? Like how I found Mateo. I'm able to advise at some of those levels, and I certainly have mentors above me for the next stage of my growth.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. I like that idea also of just like CEO staying at the front lines, being close to the product. I think I remember listening to a podcast on the CEO of Uber, Dara, who's like, it's a pretty big company at Uber, right? And he's like, he went for like 2 weeks as a driver, basically, so he and came back with like a whole list of things to improve, and apparently put them in place, and now engagement numbers went way up. And you would think, oh, CEO, big public company, I don't have time to do this. And it's like, well, actually, that's kind of the job, right? It's,
I think
not
it's
forgetting.
your own job. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. And even our own team, we had like a little internal mentorship program that we made that was like a little bit more abstract and like a fake one, but we try to use the product as much as possible. We use it for all of our all hands, and we create master classes so that we can understand how people are feeling about it.
Yeah. I don't know if like it's the right question to ask, lessons learned, but like maybe with a bit of perspective, like things that you've learned that, you share with other entrepreneurs, that even like you said, advice, I think contextual advice, like do X is always wrong. It's always about principles and learning from other people. So like going back to mentorship, I find it's a kind of great point where, hey, this is what happened to me, the good and the bad, and when I learned, and those, just that as feedback could be very useful to someone that's starting on their journey. So curious as to what you share in terms of your own personal lessons so far.
I would just say anything that's not related to talking to customers or building a better product for them should be ignored. Like 100% ignored. Not, oh, I'll do this event and I'll do a panel, but I don't really have time for it. Like I have very specific rules now. It's like I will do a panel in person if it's after 6 p.m. or, I will do this if it helps us move forward. I will take an investor call only if we're raising. If not, I can be upfront to say, hey, this will be 15 minutes, but we're just focused on breaking even, whatever that is. So I think the hyper focus has hit me in the pandemic, and I will continue it moving forward. I think when you're first starting the company, you're just hungry for knowledge anywhere you can. But our energy is limited. Like that's the only thing that's limited. So if it's not relating to dollars coming into your company, I would not do it. And I think that's a deeper personal lesson related to like ego, and you think you need so much mentorship to start, but you don't. Like you need to start, and you need to start making money. and it's, it's not impersonal, but if you're looking to sell your company or if you're looking to fundraise, like you are a balance sheet, and how do you make those numbers go up? And I think that's the most important thing in a company, and you should do everything to do that.
This is great advice. Like I think it's a great way to end the conversation, where just like do the effing work, right? Mm-hmm. And you said like things like going back to previous point about the highlights of the tech world and startup world about financing or whatever, but it's inconsequential to the value you're delivering. The value you're delivering is measured by dollars and cents, and ultimately it's by the customer value. Like you said, if it's not delivering the value to customers, improving their product, it doesn't really matter. So so I'm happy that you ended up doing the podcast. So it does hopefully bring some value to you.
It did, yes. And I mean, remote things are always great, and it fits into our marketing, right? Like our marketing says you need to be public facing at least once a week. So I was really happy to talk to you. I've listened to a few with friends that are in the Montreal startup community, and it's really cool because you may pass by and say, how are you doing? How are things? But you never really hear their stories, and people have like very nuanced and long backgrounds that I'm so excited to get to know. And thanks for putting this podcast together. I think it's helpful to hear stories of other people. It's sort of like mentorship at scale a little bit.
Appreciate it, Ashley. And final question for you is, if people want to learn more, maybe reach out directly and learn more about your journey at Mentorly, what's the best way?
Yeah, we're at mentorly.com, and anywhere on socials you can find us, or you can find me directly on socials, Ashley Werhun. My handles are A Werhun on all socials. So looking forward to talking to more people about mentorship.
Thank you so much for your time, Ashley. As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. If you want to learn more, check out thepnr.com.